Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. So where do I start? I was as well once a student 30 years ago in '94, and I was studying those subjects. It's been quite a journey through those 30 years, especially when I graduated. I got my first job as working for machine learning, basically, not working for machine learning, working with machine learning. And I was transferring technology from university to businesses. This is when I first got interested and understood the power of artificial intelligence and how we can use it as a tool to enhance and basically build something that is going a little bit beyond the kind of human capabilities, having a helping hand that augments what we're really trying to do. I did a PhD as well in that area. So I was trying to translate from text to images and from images back to text, multimodality, I used to call it. We call it generative AI now. But it's interesting to understand that actually those concepts are not new. So it's nothing that is so much different from what we've been trying to do for all these decades. What has been changing over the years is that we now have more capable technology. Technology allows us to run things a bit faster. And also algorithms have adapted to be able to utilize these new capabilities of technology and hardware to allow us to build these large language models or foundation models, as some others might call them, which at the end of the day, if we try to kind of demystify this a little bit, is nothing more than a large model that contains trained on lots and lots and lots of data that eventually can exhibit all this knowledge by ways of us kind of making queries and trying to get this knowledge out of it. Now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to look into the dawn of AI, trying to see how did we get there. But also, I want to speak to you about generative AI a little bit. And where are we today? Can we actually utilize it to the degree where we can make our lives a bit better? And why not also try to understand how far is that going to get? Is it kind of a danger as well to us? Would it replace us? Would it take over? Those are lots of questions that obviously everyone has, and it would be interesting to kind of start to understand what's behind this concept of this new era of AI. Is it really that dangerous or not? I don't think we can answer all these questions, but it's good to kind of start thinking about it because your future, I suppose, will be massively affected by the way that technology is moving nowadays. So let's start with generative AI. If you look at the businesses nowadays, you will see that almost, maybe I could even say 80 to 90% of businesses would be interested now to understand how this can transform and help them to basically do better business. How can it transform the way that they're doing things in a way that it will make better customer experiences? It will optimize the way that they build products, reduce any kind of loss, improve the environmental footprint, and so on and so forth. Those are the biggest ideas. This is the nice way of kind of thinking about how generative AI can make an improvement to our lives. Generative AI has, as I was explaining earlier, started from this concept where we want to be able to use artificial intelligence as a tool to help us do things better. But what really has helped us, sorry, some graphics here don't show very well. So where this is taking us now with this technology being up to the standards where it can actually run those models is that now we finally managed to reach that step where we can see things becoming practical. So let's think about the basic foundation model. When you look at the foundation model, what you realize is that it's a system that takes in inputs So most of the times what we do is we just feed it with lots of data. The reason we feed it with data, and you will see that those foundation models, mainly the most common type of foundation model would be with text, although it has been used with other types of data as well. I will go to that in a minute. Is because what we wanted to do is to understand our language. If we can understand our language, and we build basically a language model out of it, then we will be able to communicate using human language with that model. And once it starts understanding the human language, it will then also start learning things that we do as humans. So basically, if we can feed the entire, all the novels that we've got, the internet, the World Wide Web, and all the documents that we possibly have, eventually it will start making associations and understanding what is happening based on this text that we're providing. Now, all this knowledge is somehow squashed into this model. So sometimes we hear about multi-million parameters. It's because we need lots of pathways, if you can imagine that. Imagine that there are many neurons, like our biological brain has many neurons to be able to store all this information. And eventually, from the input all the way to this cognition, the output that it has pathways to be able to make sense. So depending on the kind of input that is receiving, eventually it will take a path to hit some sort of output that makes some sort of sense. Now, the foundation models, they take you up to a level. So the level of being able to understand language and have some knowledge. But the thing is, we want this to be able to continue at some point, right? So this is where you start hearing about fine-tuning the models and continuously basically teaching it more and more things, or even giving it access to data that is not directly associated with the training data that it has. So opening up the pathway for it to be able to reach out, understand new data, and then being able to interpret it. So that's what the foundational model is doing, is giving you capabilities to communicate in human language and then understand and interpret new data that you're providing it in real time and make sense out of it and come back to you with an answer that is generated. Okay, this is quite different. The part of the generation is really what makes it different from the standard models we've seen so far. Usually we would hard code the outputs to be different categories and so on and so forth. This time, these models will generate the output every time, and depending on how much liberty you give it, and imagination, as we might call it, the temperature, it will basically generate some new output. So this is very clever. There are many different applications of it. If we look at what has been analyzed by Goldman Sachs, is that the GDP is expected to reach $7 trillion in the next few years due to generative AI. Well, AI, ML generally, but generative AI is now what is really making that possible. And even growth by 1.5% is expected to be seen based on this trend of generative AI. Now, if we look at the different use cases that we can imagine, there are things that will help us enhance customer experiences. So chatbots, applications that will help us do that. There are tools that generative AI can be used to boost employee productivity and creativity. And we will see that those tools are actually quite interesting because it allows a creative person to finally have some tools to be able to express their imagination, because sometimes, apart from being a creative person, if you do not have the skill set to actually put it in a drawing or music or whatever that is, it's blocking you from being able to express yourself. I say that generative AI will actually unblock these people to be able to actually have finally a tool that they can speak to and be able to generate art. And it's not the generative AI that it generates. It is still under the instructions and imagination of the human that this is going to take place. And of course, looking at businesses, it can optimize the business processes as well. There are ways that it can make things better by being able to find the information you need in your business, and quickly taking decisions which are more accurate and based on some sort of facts that you can get these tools to help you with. So I've got some examples here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but for customer experiences, you have chatbots, virtual assistants, conversational analytics, and so on and so forth. For creativity and productivity, you have conversational search. Imagine if you can actually search through a dialogue, which makes it a lot easier. You can summarize the text. So let's say at the end of a very long presentation, if you could have the main points of that conversation summarized to you would be great. Content creation and so on and so forth. And then with business processes, you can have document processing. Imagine the legal firms being able to explain in human terms if you are covered for a policy or not. Because sometimes those documents can be so complicated, and as humans, sometimes we don't even understand our own language. So if you could have tools to actually help you understand some documents, would be great, right? So lots and lots of examples out there. Now there is again, the graphics don't show all the text here, but we have put together at AWS a website. You can Google it, Use Case Explorer, probably to find it, where you can find many different use cases, including generative AI as well. So if you want to see what kind of applications you might be able to, utilize, maybe even the kind of things that you might be able to do later on as a career, I think this is a great inspiration to have a look at. But let's explore one. So I'm going to go through one example just to see a bit more as to the kind of use case we might be talking about. And then after that, I will go a little bit more under the hood and show you some products, some tools you can use to actually build such systems. So generative AI for media and entertainment. Lots of examples here. The interesting thing that we're observing already with the customers that we have, at least for at AWS, is that they are now looking at a growth of about 30%, which is quite significant, based on just one factor, the generative AI. And the type of benefits that we see customers having, again, apologies for the graphics, they don't show. Actually, the next slide will be better, right? So at least shows up. So we have things for images and videos, where you can be looking at utilizing generative AI for actually building even videos. There is an example out there where people have used language to generate video for an imaginary movie and creating the trailer for it. Again, if you Google it, you will probably see it. It's incredible how you can use generative AI to actually build the whole thing. And if you instruct it correctly, this is really creating this proof of concept that you need as a creator to be able to kind of show your ideas and then obviously use your skill set to build a proper thing, even the entire movie, right? But imagine if you can show and express something by, in a few minutes by asking these models to generate content for you. With images, it's the same thing. An artist can now take a picture and then speak to it and start showing, generating things in the image. And then, after playing around with that, start doing the actual work. With audio, you get people that can now express the type of music they would like to hear, and they can even generate songs. With text, you can start having, creating poems, creating ads that might go into your website, obviously creating your homework, right? And of course, if you look at searching, you can now search through the media that in previous times you could not. You had to actually see the video to be able to find the scene, but now you can actually speak and search in different means to be able to identify the kind of things you're looking for. So this is an example of creating a new image content where this is completely generated by describing as to what you want to appear there. Video content where, again, you would express the type of prompting that you want to see. So, you can say a boat with Van Gogh style, and basically can generate things like this for you. And then finally, music content generation, where you can build music based on the human expressions rather than actually doing the mixing yourself. So lots of examples that we can see there. And finally, the summarization of text, or you could start using that for reading assistance. As I said, if you want to read a complex contract and some terms, you can ask it simple questions so that you can understand it. And then writing assistant, if you're writing a blog and you put the key points there, and then basically that generates the text for you, and then you do some proofreading, and eventually you submit it live after you're happy with the way that it looks. And remember, you can keep on prompting and correct it and fix it using that model that will eventually listen to you and do that. Okay, so there are 4 areas now, if we look at ways of building such applications that we're going to look at. So for AWS, there are 4 things that we're looking at when we consider our customers. They want to have easy ways to build applications. Okay, not every business has the technical capability to build or fine-tune or even consume generative AI models. Then we talk about the data. Every business usually has its own data. How can you utilize your own data to customize those models and help you specifically? And also, the other question is, how can I protect my data? But even more importantly, how can I control what comes out of the generative AI models? And I will talk about a few basic ways we can do that in a minute. Then how do we increase productivity in our business? That's another common ask. And finally, how can we do that with high performance at low costs? Is there any kind of, what are the capabilities now of hardware? How can we find it, and so on? So those are the 4 main questions, and I'm going to go through them. So the main application that you're going to hear about from Amazon that we use to build generative AI, well, to fine-tune, let's say, and utilize generative AI and build applications with that, is called Bedrock. So Bedrock, it's a tool that gives you access to the most popular models out there and allows you to take a model, a foundation model, and either using the UI that is available there, you can try them out. So for example, we have what is called the playground, and you can just go in there, try out and see if those models do the kind of work that you're thinking about. And eventually, basically create an API, an interface to be able to communicate with them and integrate them into your application. Once you've realized that the model works in this playground, as we call it, then it's ready for you to start using it. Bedrock will allow you to fine-tune those models so you can start pushing your data into that system and customize it. and eventually get the capabilities that you are after, including integrating to services with what we call agents. So if you look at the foundation model, the main thing that it can do is to respond to the inputs, right? But if you need to give it access to other data, like integrating it with the web, with a service, let's say you want to do a booking, then what is needed is something called an agent. The agent extends the capabilities of the foundation model and allows it to basically communicate with other systems. So that's the whole concept there. Bedrock will allow you to be doing this through that system. Great, thank you. Now you see the text as well. So where is generative AI to help us with that? See, humans are still needed, right? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to jump to the slide. Good. So this is basically Bedrock that I was talking about earlier, and the slide for creating all the available models that are now part of Bedrock. As you can see, the concept here and what we're trying to achieve is that we provide access to not just one, but almost everything that is popular out there, from AI21 labs all the way to our own kind of models within Amazon called Titan. But then here you have access to Jurassic, Claude 2, Llama, which is another popular one, and so on and so forth. And obviously more and more models will be coming through. Those are already, most of them actually are already available, and you can just play around with them and see which one works best for you. Why do we have so many models? Because depending on the type of application, you do not want to take the biggest, most expensive model to solve every problem. There are actually models that will work really well, and they do not cost as much. And cost with generative AI, it can be quite high, because those models with the millions and millions of parameters, they basically need very expensive hardware to run, not to train, even to run. So you might be even paying tens of dollars per hour to run those models. I mean, if you take one of the most demanding models, they might actually be running on multiple hardware, so not just one GPU, because the memory that it needs can only be achieved by combining multiple lots of hardware together. So it can be very expensive. Okay, so this is the agent that I was talking about, and this is great because it allows you to integrate with so many other services that you might want to bring to the to bring it to your foundation model, so you can generate knowledge from those as well. Now, next thing is your data. And one important thing I mentioned earlier is that because data is your differentiator, you want to make sure that quality that comes out of your application relates always to the data that you've got. So you want to protect your data, first of all, but you also want to protect your customers and the people who are accessing the generative AI model anyways, right? So the things that you can do will be, first of all, to fine tune the model to make sure that it will be a lot more accurate. Let's say if you take a generative model and you want to fine tune it for finance or medical applications or anything that is domain specific, fine tuning usually is the way to do it. Another way is also, as I was saying, utilizing agents to give them access to new documentation that they can read in real time. There is also prompting, where you can explain to it the kind of things you are after, and then you can generate based on those instructions. So prompting is basically your communication. It's the way that you explain to a child, how do you want them to respond back? And finally, we want to also protect ourselves and the customers who are using those models from anything that could be misinterpreted, unfair, discriminating, and maybe even the AI taking over, right? So what we want to do is to create some guardrails, and there are lots of tools for doing that as well. So you can build heuristics on top of these models, rules basically, which will prohibit it from going in directions that you do not want them to go. And those are easily integrated into these systems. The systems have been made in a way that they accept those type of scripts with all these rules, and then they operate in the same way as any software system would operate and control basically the outputs of this system. So guardrails would be the kind of things you would be looking at. And of course, by choosing the right model, some models have been trained with data that is clean, that is not discriminating, and so on and so forth. So always choose the right model. That's why we have so many models out there as well. Some of them have already been cleaned on purpose so that they don't have any of these issues by default. But of course, still consider guardrails to double ensure that everything would go smoothly. Okay, so there are many ways to also keep your data secure, and obviously within the cloud environment, such as the one that AWS is offering, you can apply security and keep the data all to yourself without giving access to anyone else, and the fine-tuned models will only be accessible to your business. So that's possible. Now, to increase productivity, I'm just going to show 3 examples. One is what we call QuickSight, which is a reporting system that is available on AWS. And this reporting system is very interesting because we started integrating generative AI into it, which means now that if you want to see insights of your data, you don't need to be a statistician and know Excel inside out. You can finally talk to the system and say, can you show me which product has been selling best for me in the last month? Show that as a chart and explain to me, why is the best-selling product? What are the relationship and which type of customers are being purchasing it? So you speak now and you generate graphs, which is great because especially if you are a business student and you want to focus really on business and understanding the kind of things that are important for the business, you don't really necessarily want to learn statistical skills as well, and you want to kind of focus and do your business a little bit better, right? Maybe you fancy playing with the data as well, which is always something that you can do, right? But that's what are the capabilities of that, and then you can do that without having a laptop. You can communicate with your mobile phone and it can speak to you back all these insights. So you don't even need to be looking at, and you can do that in the train, right? The other interesting one is Health Scribe. So Health Scribe, what it can do, it can look and follow a conversation that the doctor has with a patient, and eventually at the end of the 20 minutes that you've got as a slot with the doctor, understand the conversation, being able to summarize it, bring up the action points, and what the doctor needs to do following that, consultation, and then you can move on to the next patient. So it optimizes their time. They don't need to do all this boring work that probably they cannot even read their own handwriting afterwards, right? And you get better customer support or patient support. So it's very interesting that technology can now be used for simple things like this. The other one and last one, as an example, is Code Whisperer. So Code Whisperer, for those who enjoy doing some programming and building some examples and some scripts, it can translate your ideas into code. So basically you can say, open this CSV file read the contents and print out a chart that shows me, the categories of the data. And then you can write the entire code for that and even execute it so that you can see the results. It has been trained on lots of code examples. And the nice thing about it is that you can even customize it. So this is a new feature that is coming out now. And you can even make it safe for your organization, because obviously when you train with code that comes from externally, and there are lots of junior people as well that may be making mistakes and so on and so forth. And also it could be containing some harmful code as well that could be dangerous to be executed. You want to have some control on that too. So now you can actually you have the capability now to do that too. So detecting any kind of dangerous code, and also customize it to the standards of the business, so that if you write in a certain style, it will generate you code that follows that style as well. All right, and the last section here is about performance and low cost. Finally, we have access to infrastructure. It has become extremely popular, so sometimes it's even hard to find demand for such hardware, especially when we're talking about 90% of the customers wanting to try out generative AI now. It's impossible sometimes to even find resources, hardware resources for that. But because, companies like Amazon have been investing in that technology for many years. For example, Amazon, even before the concept of generative AI, we already had chipsets that were made specifically for machine learning. So AWS Trainium and Inferentia 2 are two examples of that. One is used for training, the other one is used for inference, which is all the predictions that we're doing, running the models. And those are specially made to be running those tasks, which means that they are a lot cheaper. Whereas if you look at traditional hardware, the GPUs as we call them, they are nothing more than graphics cards, right? So they used to be, the main purpose was to create quickly the graphics so that you don't see lag when you play games. But now, because they were doing quick computations, that's why those GPUs are so important for doing all these matrix multiplications, right? So finally, now we start seeing hardware that are actually built for AI rather than just for graphics. And obviously it will be more efficient and cheaper to run and so on and so forth. So even better for the environment. And the last thing, for those who are more into hands-on experience with generative AI, there are even more models to consider, not through only Bedrock. There is something that we call Jumpstart, SageMaker Jumpstart. So what our engineers have done is to basically think of different examples, and Jumpstart, the reason it's called Jumpstart is because it will accelerate your ability to get started by having some examples for certain use cases that are super popular. So we already wrote the code for you, and you can just jump in the platform, explore the many tens and tens of examples that are available there, and eventually pick up one, modify it in your own way, and then just run it and play around with generative AI. So there are ways, very easy ways that you can now get started and learn about generative AI. And of course, you can always use Code Whisperer to write the code for you if you wanted to, and so on. But SageMaker is the main tool that Amazon has for all the AI and machine learning that you might want to do, which also gives you access to all the hardware that AWS has. So if you want to do some training on your models, then SageMaker will take that script and it will execute it on the hardware, that you don't have to have your own laptop to execute, some complex calculations that will not run on your machine probably, and eventually give you back the model and the results of that. And yeah, we're integrating with more and more models all the time. All right, I'm just in time. So to summarize, that's where we're heading. Hopefully, I've given you some understanding of the main principles of generative AI, how this is used nowadays in the industry, where we're moving next now, and all the tools that makes it feasible. So I'm going to pass it on to Anna, who will show you some nice demos. If you have any questions, then do let me know. Otherwise, we'll go on with Anna. Any questions? Yes.
Something like Hans Sky that be available to our students and provide for free.
Tell me again the name. What? How? Oh, HealthScribe, yes. So this is available to, this is in preview at the moment. It's a bit of a limited preview, but it's something that we can definitely work together and make it available. The limited preview, usually what it means is that we are working with organizations and we provide access to it. So it should be possible, yeah.
Probably got time for another question if anyone has. If you could raise your hand.
Yep.
Is it true that the CEO of ChatGPT carries around a
Might be, you never know. So I'm just going to answer it in the sense of what is all that hype about generative AI taking over the world, right? So it's an interesting one because it always depends on the human. I don't think it depends on the actual technology itself. It depends on how humans want to utilize it. As with any other tool, that can also become a weapon, right? I think it's up to us. I think it's totally controllable. And I don't think there are scenarios, not in the next few decades at least, where I would anticipate AI taking over the world and building its own AI. Not yet. Okay, one more. Yeah.
We control it. As long as we control it. What about the most important thing in my view, which is the algorithm transparency? As long as we control it, so we can embed hidden agenda and we can do it without even being noticed.
Yeah.
So is there any sort of regulation here? I mean, Uber example is a very good example. You can't prove it, but it's there.
Yeah. So indeed, AI, it's a bit of a black box, right? The knowledge that is hidden within its hidden layers is very hard to interpret because it's just numbers. It basically is only numbers, right? So what we are trying to do now is to try to detect things that might be wrong with the models layer by layer. Amazon already has started something called Clarify. So Clarify is looking at understanding the inner workings of the neural network, basically, and being able to detect any kind of anomalies in there. So to a degree, we have started working on that. I think there is still lots of room to improve and be able to put more light into this black box. But it's definitely something that concerns everyone to be able to at least be able to interpret. I mean, why is it behaving in the way that it behaves? And once you understand why it's behaving in a certain way, you can then fix it. But if you do not, then it's harder to be able to fix things, right? So this can become a worry because if suddenly AI behaves in a way to start tricking people, I've heard lots of stories about AI chatting because it didn't want the human to shut it down. Are this true or not? I don't know yet. I'm just scaring people at the moment. But as long as we start understanding what's going on in this black box, then we will be a little bit more certain that things are, in our hand. Definitely there is a worry. I'm not going to deny that. But there is a lot of work that is happening now, early days. Some is called responsible AI, some is related to ethics, and so on and so forth, that eventually will build those guardrails to be able to control and also understand these complex models. Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Anna.